All right, well, let's look at a few news stories. So it came out recently, an increasing number of attackers are attacking firewalls. And Cisco firewalls had some 0 days that were being attacked. Their ASA firewalls, adaptive security appliances, these things have been around for a long time. And state-sponsored spies are getting in. So people say it's probably China. And they've been coming in since November of last year. And they found 2 vulnerabilities in these appliances. One they're calling Line Dancer, lets them run their own code. And one called Line Runner allows them to maintain access even when the device is restarted. So they're coming in through the firewalls. This is a relatively new technique and a thing to worry about because there's not much defense for edge devices like firewalls. It seems like pretty soon we're going to have firewalls running antivirus on them or something like that, but right now I don't know any that have that. You should consider going to RSA. I put it at the top of my page. B-Sides is coming up. That's worth going to. Hack the Bay is an event worth going to, and so is RSA. If you want to go to RSA, there's one free day called College Day. You can go on Thursday by just clicking this link and signing up there. You can also get an Expo ticket for the other days by just Googling free Expo passes to RSA. What happens is vendors who pay get a certain number of Expo passes or something like that, and you don't use them all. So it's always the case that if you just look here, there'll be instructions how to get a free Expo pass from all these different vendors. So if you just look through, like here's a code that will get you a free pass from LastPass, and here's one from somebody called Red Seal, and so on. A lot of people just publish these codes. So if you use them, you should be able to get a free Expo pass, which doesn't get you to the whole conference, but it gets you to the main floor, and I think it might get you to the villages. I'm going to be there giving a talk at the Dark Arch Village. There's a lot of other little villages there. And I think you get to some of them with the free Expo Pass, but I'm not sure. That might take the Expo Plus Pass or something. But anyway, you'll get to see a lot of what's happening in cybersecurity there, and also at those other conferences. Let me check for comments. I can see from here, no comments in the chat. All right. So this one I heard about on Steve Gibson's podcast, which is very good. The Ukrainians have been doing ICS attacks. They have written something called Stuxnet, which is obviously imitating the American attack of Stuxnet on the Iranian isotope separators. And what they claim is they have found, with this malware, they have been taking over industrial equipment in Russia, and in Moscow, they have found that they can take over the gateways and destroy them that control the sewage system, the water plants, and many other parts of the infrastructure. So, and the way they're doing it is they're taking over the gateway, then they flood all the devices with random traffic trying to crash them, and then they destroy the gateway. They wipe out all the operating system, they destroy the bootloader, they try to do multiple regenerations to the ROM, to the dynamic RAM on the device, whatever kind of RAM it is, to try to wear it out, and then they turn off the device so it's bricked, and it can only be restored by physically going there and replacing it or perhaps reflashing the firmware. So it sounds like they, at least if their claims are correct, they really seriously messed up the infrastructure around Moscow. And it's interesting. I taught a pirate class in OT security, and after that I found a much better textbook from the U.S. government. But this is really important these days, as everybody's critical infrastructure is getting hacked. And I was just reading another report on it today that said the most popular protocol by far is still Modbus, which is like 30 years old and has no security at all. So these things are pretty vulnerable. And securing them is getting more and more important. So NVIDIA has made a new coding large language model, which apparently runs very well. Now, most people that have tested it all tell me that GPT-4 does a pretty good job of writing Python code, but it's logically going to be incredibly wasteful because GPT-4 has been trained on the whole internet, so it knows fiction and religion and all sorts of other non-coding things. So they're making a special model that just knows coding and nothing else. It's just been trained on code. It's called Star Coder 2. And there's a big version that knows like hundreds of languages, and there's a small version that only knows the 17 most popular languages, which is the one I'm interested in. That's so small you can probably run it on a small device like a laptop or a cell phone, and they say it's very good. In testing it, it's very good at coding. So I'd like to see how good that is. This really is something I've been waiting for. Small large language models focused on just one purpose that are not so huge and expensive. These are much more productive, I think, than these trying to make one universal, one-size-fits-all LLM that will solve every problem, which is one of the main problems with it. It costs so much money to run that all of the services like ChatGPT that we're using now are losing for the companies making them. They're not going to make any money until they make them much cheaper to run. And one way is to make them more specialized so they don't have to have such a huge database of training material and therefore not such a huge model. So AI voice cloning has become extremely good, and unfortunately a lot of banks have already approved voice authentication. And now they say 91% of them using it have said they're probably going to have to quit using it because it's clearly not safe to just listen to your voice on the telephone and feel like you can authenticate from your voice anymore. It's too bad. That just sort of had time to roll out just in time to become insecure. But that's where it is. So here you go. In Tennessee, teachers are going to have firearms in schools. So they haven't yet approved having all the students carry guns too. That would be the next logical thing. I'm surprised I haven't heard that called for in the red states. That seems like something that Ron DeSantis would probably do. Anyway, I've seen this come around many, many times. This is the fundamental argument of the Republicans is typically that every time there's a shooting, that's because there weren't enough good people there with guns. And if just lots and lots of people had guns, you'd have a glorious, peaceful place. This doesn't seem to be true in practice, but that doesn't seem to matter in the world of politics. They seem to revel in things like this, like outlawing drugs will get rid of them, outlawing abortion will get rid of it, having more guns will make the world safer. There's just a bunch of strange beliefs that are clung to very strongly by the people on the right in America, and no amount of proof will prove them wrong. Like, here's another one. Giving people free money will just make them lazy and they won't work. In fact, studies have showed repeatedly that universal basic income is extremely effective at getting people out of poverty. If you give people $500 or $1,000 a month for a year, what most of them do is get a better job, get an education, something like that, get a better apartment, and if they don't become lazy and do nothing, they're finally able to do the things they need to get moving, for most of them. So anyway, it's another one of these things. This is amazing and wonderful. One of the huge problems with operational technology is people install things like a water treatment plant or something, and they expect it to run for like 30 or 40 years. But if there's any computers in there, within 3 or 4 years, the computer software and hardware is considered out of date and not maintained anymore. So it's a huge problem. So Canonical has got an answer here. I've never seen anybody do this. They're now announcing their long-term support, which used to be 5 years, is now going to be 12 years. And now you're talking. You really ought to distribute an operating system, and you really ought to promise to update and patch it for a long time if you want people to use it. So if I was designing a new piece of infrastructure, like heavy, expensive equipment, like a fancy printer or an X-ray machine or something, I would really be looking into basing it on Ubuntu so that you will have something like 12 years of supported lifetime. So there's an Apache product, which is apparently archived, but people do use the archived ones, the ones that are no longer under development, and they found dependency confusion. I wasn't aware of this, but in Apache, I'm not sure what language they wrote this in, but they can load a library. And when they load a library, they just refer to it by name, and what apparently the developers didn't know is the first thing it does is look in public repositories for that library. Then it looks for the local library, which is what they wanted to use. So at the time they wrote it, that was okay because there was no public repository by that name. But now somebody has made a public repository with that name. So that's dependency confusion. They'll load the wrong library. So it's a simple way to insert code. I've seen this called a companion Trojan when used on Windows systems, where you put a library in like the downloads folder, and that ends up being used instead of the library in the systems folder. So that's another vulnerability you see coming by now and then. Japan is going to have robot trucks, and they're trying to make special roads just for the robot trucks. which is probably a pretty good idea, dedicating roads. I've seen in Amsterdam, they have special paths dedicated just for bicycles. And that's a really good idea, so the bike riders don't have to mingle with the cars. And probably having the robot trucks isolated from the rest of the traffic would make sense. Then it'd be essentially the same thing as rail lines. There'd just be these designated lines with automated devices running on them. Apparently this is necessary in Japan. Japan has a huge problem with too many old people and not enough young people. It's the graying. America's going to have that problem pretty soon if we don't reform our immigration laws, because as every other rich economy down through history has found, once people get rich, they don't have kids very much anymore. It happened to the ancient Romans. It happened to every powerful society. Once you're rich and peaceful, most people choose not to have large families. So if you don't let immigrants in, you're going to have a lot of old people and not enough young people to support them. And it's happened to Japan. It's likely to happen here too. So anyway, they have to have robot trucks because they don't have enough people that want to work to drive those trucks. So I was unaware of this. They're finally punishing people for the fake electors. In Arizona, they've indicted Trump. He's not indicted co-conspiracy, but they've indicted Giuliani, Meadows, and a bunch of his other pals that made the fake certificates to claim to be electors. And one of the other states has also done this. So I'm glad to see some justice happening there. And I think that's it. Let me stop the news.